Maeve Rowan crossed the ballroom before anyone could decide whether to pretend not to be watching. The charity auction had been sliding toward its final, champagne-soft hour. A string quartet played near the windows. Rain battered the glass 30 floors above Manhattan, turning the city beyond it into smeared ribbons of red and white. Guests in black tie clustered beneath the chandeliers with their phones angled carelessly at their sides, pretending they were only checking messages. Julian Vale had just stepped back into the room. Celia Rowan stood near the bar, barefoot now, her silver heels hooked over 2 fingers. Her mascara had not run, but her eyes were too bright. Maeve saw all of it. Then she reached Julian and threw both arms around him. Not politely. Not like a sister greeting someone at a family dinner. She pressed her face into the dark wool of his jacket and held on as if the floor had tilted beneath her. Julian felt her breath catch against his collarbone. "Now we're finally equal," she whispered. The sentence was quiet. It still traveled. Aunt Vivian's eyebrows rose. Someone near the auction table stopped laughing in the middle of a sentence. Across the room, Celia went very still. Maeve's fingers tightened at Julian's back. For one suspended second, he could have made it worse in a dozen civilized ways. He could have stepped away too quickly. He could have softened it with a joke. He could have looked toward Celia as if asking permission to handle her younger sister. Instead, he lowered his head and said, softly enough for Maeve, clearly enough for everyone nearest them to hear, "That isn't equality, Maeve. That's just the first time you've been allowed to leave the competition." Her body went rigid in his arms. Outside, lightning opened the sky above the East River. The ballroom lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. A few people laughed nervously. Someone dropped a glass. The string quartet stopped in a tangle of unfinished notes. The emergency lights came on low and amber, giving every face in the room the color of an old photograph. Maeve pulled away first. She looked at Julian as if she had forgotten there were witnesses. Then she glanced past him and saw Celia standing near the bar with her shoes in one hand and a hand pressed flat against the marble counter. The shame arrived all at once. Maeve's mouth tightened. "I should go," she said. The hotel manager was already moving through the crowd, speaking into an earpiece. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a temporary electrical fault due to the storm. The elevators are operational on emergency power. Valet service and coat check may be delayed." Maeve's hand flew to the small bare space beneath her throat. "My bag." Julian followed her gaze toward the coat check corridor. "My keys are in there," she said. "My coat, my phone charger, everything." Her phone screen lit in her hand. 3% battery. Then it went black. The rain struck the windows harder. And suddenly Julian remembered the sound of Celia's heels in that corridor less than 15 minutes earlier, the quiet, hard click of one shoe against the polished floor as she walked away from him for the last time. She had taken them off near the end, holding them by their straps as if the evening had become too heavy to carry properly. The hallway outside the ballroom had been nearly empty then. The hotel's old brass sconces glowed against green velvet walls. Rain streaked the glass at the far end, distorting the city into watery gold. Behind them, the gala continued with its pleasant noise of glasses and expensive laughter. Celia leaned one shoulder against the window. Her midnight blue dress was elegant enough to make strangers turn when she entered a room, but Julian had known her long enough to see the small signs beneath it. The way she had unfastened her earrings. The way she was rubbing her thumb over the crescent of bare skin where a ring might have been if either of them had ever been willing to ask for one. "You knew," she said. Julian stood a few feet away, one hand resting against the back of a velvet chair. "About London?" Celia nodded. "I knew you were considering it." "No." Her laugh was quiet and without humor. "You knew I wanted it." He did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. She looked at the rain on the glass. "I got the offer this morning. Director of programs. The gallery is opening a second space in Mayfair. Her voice softened. It's the job I said I wanted when I was 24 and pretending I didn't care whether I got it. You should take it. I know. The words hummed between them. From the ballroom, applause rose for something neither of them had seen. Celia turned toward him. Her expression was calm, but not untouched. I thought you'd ask whether I wanted you to come. Julian's jaw shifted slightly. And then I realized, she continued, that I didn't want you to ask. He looked down for a moment. She crossed the space between them, close enough that he could smell the familiar clean scent of her perfume beneath the champagne and candle smoke. She reached up and smoothed the edge of his collar. They had been together 8 months. Long enough to know each other's preferred restaurants, bad habits, work rhythms, and family tensions. Long enough to move through charity dinners and opening nights with the ease of people who never had to explain where they stood. They had also somehow avoided asking each other for anything difficult. I care about you, Celia said. I care about you too. I know. Her fingers stayed at his collar for another second. That's part of it. Julian watched her face. She had always been good at making difficult things look organized. A gallery opening. A family crisis. A room full of donors who hated one another and still needed to sit at adjacent tables. Celia knew how to keep everything upright. But there was no polish in her eyes now. We make each other's lives easy, she said. We are very good at being considerate. We never fight badly. We never ask too much. We never make the other person choose. Julian breathed out slowly. No, he said. We don't. I don't know if that's love. Her voice broke lightly on the last word, almost too small to hear. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's just not enough of it. The rain ran down the window in silver lines. Julian could have told her London was too far. He could have said they would figure it out. He could have offered a plan, a compromise, a long-distance arrangement built carefully from calendars and flights. Instead, he looked at her and saw the truth she had carried into the hallway. They had both been waiting for the other person to want something badly enough to disrupt the peace. Neither of them had. We took care of each other, he said. But we never really let each other in. Celia's eyes filled. She nodded once. That's exactly it. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead briefly against his chest. Julian put his arms around her because there was no reason not to. It was not a desperate embrace. It was not the kind that asked someone to stay. It was the kind that admitted they would not. When she stepped back, she wiped beneath one eye with the side of her thumb. You'll be all right, she said. He almost smiled. That sounds suspiciously like a thing people say when they are leaving. It is. She looked toward the ballroom doors. Before she turned away, she reached up one last time and flattened the small fold in his lapel. Then she walked back toward the music. Julian stayed by the window for another minute, watching rain run over the city. He had thought being mature meant never making someone carry the weight of his wants. Standing alone in that hallway, he understood that sometimes maturity was simply another word for fear dressed well. The emergency lights in the ballroom hummed. Maeve stood near the coat-check corridor with her hands clenched at her sides. Her dark hair, already damp from the walk into the hotel, had begun to curl at the ends. The black dress she wore was sleek and severe, but the hem had been spattered with rainwater. A hotel employee stood between her and the locked coat-check room. I understand, Maeve was saying, too sharply. I understand that the system is down. My belongings are still physically behind that door. Ms. Rowan, the electronic access panel has failed, the employee replied. We're waiting for maintenance. I don't need a panel. I need someone with a key. We're looking for, my car keys are in there. A few guests had drifted close enough to watch without appearing to watch. Julian saw the exact moment Maeve realized it. The tightening in her shoulders. The quick, dangerous laugh that escaped her. Of course. Of course this would happen tonight. Her fiancé had cancelled their wedding 4 months ago through a conversation that began with the phrase "we need to be honest." Her mother had spent the entire gala introducing her to people as Celia's younger sister, with an extra pause before adding, "Maeve designs lighting." And now, after publicly embracing her sister's newly ex-boyfriend, she was about to become the woman yelling at coat check in front of half the people who knew her family. Julian stepped beside her. The manager looked relieved to see him. "Mr. Vale, I'm sorry about the inconvenience." Julian glanced toward the sealed door, then at Maeve. "She's not trying to make your night more difficult," he said easily. "She's had enough things taken from her this evening. She'd prefer not to leave her keys behind too." The manager's expression shifted. Maeve looked at Julian. He did not look at her as if she were a problem he had solved. He was already speaking quietly with the manager, asking where the service stairs were, whether the physical override was on another floor, whether an engineer was in the building. Within 5 minutes, a maintenance supervisor arrived with a flashlight and a ring of keys. "It may take a while," the supervisor warned. "The storm knocked out the storage access system. We have to open it manually." Maeve folded her arms. "How long?" 45 minutes, maybe an hour." She looked toward the ballroom where her family was still gathered in warm clusters beneath the amber emergency lights. Julian followed her gaze. "Come downstairs," he said. "I don't need babysitting." "I didn't offer babysitting." "You offered something." "Yes," he said. "A place where Aunt Vivian cannot ask whether you drank too much." Maeve's mouth twitched despite herself. Julian added, "It's a rare luxury. We should take it while it exists." The hotel cafe was almost closed. The lights were dimmed, and only 2 tables remained occupied, a couple arguing quietly over a wet umbrella and a man in a tuxedo asleep upright beside a half-empty glass of water. The barista had begun stacking chairs on one side of the room. Outside, the sidewalk gleamed black beneath the rain. Yellow taxis passed through standing water, their tires hissing. Maeve sat in the farthest booth, near the window. She had borrowed a hotel cardigan, pale gray and too large, over her black dress. Her phone sat dead beside the salt shaker. Julian returned from the counter carrying 2 cups. He placed one in front of her. She looked down. "Latte. Extra sugar." "You remembered?" she asked. "You hate bitter coffee." "I don't hate it. You made a face at Celia's birthday dinner last year." Maeve looked up sharply. Julian sat across from her, black coffee in his own hand. "You remember that? You told everyone it was fine," he said. "Then you poured 6 packets of sugar into it when you thought nobody was looking." For the first time that night, Maeve laughed. It was not a polished sound. It came out surprised and uneven, as if she had almost forgotten how. "You make that sound very incriminating." "I'm just saying," Julian said, "you have excellent instincts and questionable cover stories." She curled both hands around the warm cup. For a few minutes, rain spoke for them. The cafe smelled faintly of espresso grounds and wet wool. The barista moved slowly behind the counter, avoiding eye contact in the way people did when they sensed a table had become emotionally dangerous. Maeve stared down at the swirl of milk foam. "Celia told you about my fiancé?" "She told me you were engaged." "Was?" Julian nodded. Maeve rubbed her thumb against the cardboard sleeve around her cup until it began to tear. "He didn't even leave dramatically," she said. "That would have been easier. There was no cheating. No big secret. We just kept fighting about stupid things. My job. His parents. Where to live. The color of a kitchen we never bought." She gave a short laugh. "One night he said he loved me, but being with me was exhausting. Julian did not rush to answer. Maeve glanced up at him. Most people filled silence when she said something painful. They offered immediate correction. He didn't mean it. You're not exhausting. You'll find someone better. The words always landed like decorative pillows thrown over a broken chair. Julian only watched her. The quiet made her continue. He said I turn everything into a trial. That I need every feeling to be argued to death. And maybe I do. Her voice lowered. Maybe I am too much work. Julian set his coffee down. Some people call a woman difficult when they only enjoyed her while she was making herself easy for them. Maeve went still. He did not soften the sentence with a smile. She looked away first. You're very good at this. At what? At knowing what to say when someone is falling apart. Julian leaned back. I'm not sure I know what to say. You always seem sure. That is a different skill. Her eyes returned to him. There was something tired in his face now that had not been there upstairs. A restraint he had carried all evening was beginning to show at the edges. Maeve's voice became quieter. Are you all right? Julian looked through the window at the rain. No, he said. The honesty changed the air. Maeve stopped tearing the cup sleeve. He took a breath. Celia and I ended things tonight. I know. I'm sorry you had to see it happen. Maeve's expression tightened. I'm sorry I made it look like I was waiting for it. You weren't. You don't know that. I know you were hurting. That doesn't make it less ugly. No, Julian said. It doesn't. She watched him carefully, almost suspiciously. He had not forgiven her in one elegant sentence. He had not told her it was fine. He was simply sitting there, allowing the truth to remain uncomfortable without turning away from her. What happened? She asked. With Celia? He nodded. She shrugged, then immediately looked ashamed of the gesture. Sorry. None of my business. It's all right. Julian ran one finger around the rim of his cup. We were good at being good to each other, he said. We were polite. Stable. Careful. We made each other's lives smoother. That sounds nice. It was nice. Maeve's eyes narrowed slightly. But I think we were both waiting for the other person to ask for something inconvenient. The cafe's overhead lights blinked once, then steadied. Maeve looked down at her hands. That sounds worse than fighting. It can be. She swallowed. I always thought you two were perfect. Julian's smile was faint. Most perfect things are designed to be looked at from a distance. The barista approached their table with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, but we're closing in 10 minutes. Maeve blinked, as if the room had just returned around her. Julian stood. Do you want another coffee somewhere else? Maeve looked toward the wet windows. Then toward the dead phone on the table. Then back at him. No, she said, too quickly. I should probably go see if my bag is out. He nodded. Of course. They walked back through the quiet hotel lobby together. The gala had thinned. The remaining guests were leaving in damp coats and expensive shoes, moving toward the elevators with the relieved urgency of people who wanted to turn an awkward evening into a story before midnight. Maeve's bag had been retrieved. The maintenance supervisor handed it over with an apology. Maeve checked for her keys, wallet, charger, sketchbook. Everything was there. She slid the strap over her shoulder. Julian stood a respectful distance away. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maeve said, "Thank you." "You're welcome." She looked toward the revolving doors. Rain hammered the glass beyond them. "You can't drive in that," Julian said. "I live in Brooklyn. I've survived worse weather." "I'm sure you have." She turned toward him. "Are you offering me a ride?" I'm offering you a dry car and a driver who knows when to stop talking. Maeve studied him. That's a very specific skill. I've had practice. She should have said no. Instead, she followed him into the storm. By morning, the photographs had traveled farther than the rain. Maeve woke late in her apartment with her dress thrown over a chair, her hair smelling faintly of hotel soap, and 17 unread messages in the Rowan family group chat. Her phone charger was plugged in beside the bed. She had no memory of putting it there. Julian must have. The thought gave her an unreasonable flutter in the center of her chest. Then she opened the messages. Aunt Vivian, everyone okay after last night? Cousin Daniel, that storm was insane. Aunt Vivian, Maeve, sweetheart, you were very emotional. Hope you're feeling better. Celia had not written anything. Neither had Julian. Maeve threw the phone onto the bed and went to make coffee. By the time she had burned one piece of toast and nearly spilled a mug of tea on the counter, another message appeared. Celia, lunch. Today. 1 o'clock. Lafayette. Please come. Maeve stared at it. A minute later, another message came. Celia, not for them. So they don't get to tell the story before we do. Maeve arrived 12 minutes late. Lafayette was bright with afternoon light and crowded with people who seemed born knowing how to wear linen in March. The restaurant's glass walls held the pale reflection of a cloudy city. Outside, rainwater still sat in the gutters, but the storm had passed. Celia sat at a corner table with their mother, Eleanor, Aunt Vivian, and Julian. Julian had chosen the chair facing the room. He looked up when Maeve entered, but he did not stand dramatically or reach for her coat. He only moved a glass of sparkling water toward the empty seat beside him. Not directly beside him. Across the table. Maeve noticed anyway. Celia looked composed in a cream blouse and black trousers. Her eyes were tired, but her posture was as perfect as ever. Eleanor rose halfway from her chair. Maeve, darling, I'm here, Maeve said. She sat down. The waiter placed menus in front of them. Nobody opened one. Aunt Vivian sighed softly. I think we all want the same thing, she said. For everyone to feel comfortable. Maeve nearly laughed. Julian's hand rested around his water glass. Vivian continued, last night was unfortunate. People saw what they saw, and of course they will talk. But perhaps it would help if Maeve simply explained that she had too much champagne and was feeling emotional. Maeve's face heated. There it was. The version of her that everyone preferred, unstable, apologetic, harmless once explained. She wasn't drunk, Celia said. Vivian looked at her. No, of course not, darling. I'm only saying, don't, Maeve said. Her voice was low. Vivian paused. Maeve pressed her palms flat against the tablecloth. Don't say you're only saying. You're always only saying something. You're only saying I'm sensitive. You're only saying I should be happy for Celia. You're only saying I should let things go. Maeve, Eleanor murmured. No. It's fine. Maeve pushed her chair back. I shouldn't have come. The legs scraped sharply across the floor. Julian stood at the same time. But he did not reach for her. He turned instead to the table. Last night doesn't need to be repaired into something easier for everyone else to repeat, he said. Aunt Vivian's expression stiffened. Julian's tone remained calm. Celia and I ended our relationship because we made that decision together. Maeve did not take anything from anyone. The waiter, passing nearby, slowed imperceptibly. Julian continued. And Maeve being upset has nothing to do with whether she deserves to be here, at this table, or in this family. Vivian opened her mouth. Julian smiled slightly. Please don't turn two women's lives into a relay race because it gives lunch better structure. The silence that followed was complete. Celia looked at him. Not gratefully. Not angrily. Simply with the clear, painful recognition that he was finally saying aloud what neither of them had asked for while they were together. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Maeve stood beside her chair, breathless. Julian looked at her then. "You can leave," he said quietly. "I'll take you home. Or you can sit down and order something excellent out of spite. Both are valid choices." Against her will, Maeve laughed. It came out wet at the edges. She sat back down. "I'm ordering the fries," she said. "Good," Julian said. "They're the only reliable thing in Manhattan." After lunch, Maeve stepped out onto Lafayette Street with her coat unbuttoned and her hair blown loose by the wind. Julian followed a moment later. Behind them, the restaurant windows reflected the table they had left, Celia leaning toward their mother, Aunt Vivian looking quieter than she had when they arrived. Maeve turned on the sidewalk. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. You said more than I would have." "No." Julian slid his hands into his coat pockets. "I stopped them from saying more than they had any right to." Maeve watched him. The city moved around them. A delivery truck groaned at the curb. Someone shouted for a cab. A cyclist cut through a puddle and sprayed water across the street. "You're very good at making people feel indebted," she said. Julian's mouth tilted. "Then don't be indebted." "What should I be?" He looked at her for 1 second longer than necessary. "Busy enough to buy me coffee sometime." Maeve's pulse did something stupid. She folded her arms. "I don't buy men coffee. I'll survive the disappointment." He started walking toward the corner. Maeve stood there watching him go. Then she called after him, "You drink it black, right?" Julian turned. "I do." "Terrible choice." "See?" he said. "You already know me." A month passed, but not in the vague, forgiving way people like to describe time. Maeve did not suddenly become fine. She still woke some mornings with anger sitting in her chest before she had opened her eyes. She still deleted messages from her former fiancé without reading past the first line. She still went to family dinner and felt herself brace when someone praised Celia too warmly. But work filled her days. She was designing a temporary light installation for the old Elysian Theater in Brooklyn, a decaying place with carved balconies, red velvet seats, and a stage that had once held vaudeville acts, bad Shakespeare, experimental dance, and one famous actress's final performance. Maeve loved it immediately. The building smelled of dust, wet brick, and warm metal. Its walls were cracked in beautiful ways. The electrical system was ancient and temperamental. Every night after the crew left, she stayed behind to test the final sequence alone. Blue light would rise from the orchestra floor first. Then gold would unfold through the balconies. The theater would seem to breathe. On the final rehearsal night, Maeve stood on stage beneath a ladder of pale light, adjusting a control tablet in one hand. The auditorium was dark. She thought she was alone. Then she heard someone shift in one of the seats. Maeve looked up. Julian sat in the center of the orchestra section. No friends. No business associates. No Celia. Just Julian in a charcoal coat, hands folded loosely in his lap, watching the blue light move slowly over the old red seats. Maeve stared at him. "You're either trespassing," she called down, "or you're very bad at arriving quietly." Julian looked up. "I was invited by the box office." "There is no box office." "Then I may have exaggerated my credentials." Maeve climbed down from the stage. "What are you doing here?" "You said the theater was better after dark." "I said that once." "You said it with conviction." He stood as she reached the aisle. The work lights caught the faint silver paint on her sleeve and one smudge across her cheek. Julian looked at it. "You've been here all day." "Since 9. Have you eaten?" Maeve narrowed her eyes. "That is an extremely irritating question." It usually is when the answer is no. She glanced toward the side exit. There's a vending machine downstairs. Then tonight is a cultural emergency. He reached into his coat pocket and held up a small paper bag. Maeve stared. You brought food? Fries. I remembered your priorities. Her mouth almost softened before she caught it. You're trying to make me like you. No, Julian said. I'm trying to prevent you from passing out on a lighting board. She took the bag from him. It was still warm. They walked backstage together, through narrow corridors where the walls were painted black and old posters peeled in strips from the plaster. Half the wall sconces had failed. The working ones cast pools of yellow light between stretches of shadow. Maeve led him toward the loading dock. Rain had started again, gentler this time. It tapped against the high windows. They sat on overturned road cases beside a tangle of coiled cable. Maeve ate fries from the bag with one hand and held the lighting tablet in the other. Julian watched the blue glow from the stage spill through the half-open door. You made all of that? He asked. I designed it. You made it. That's not the same thing. Why not? Because there are electricians, programmers, riggers, an entire team of people keeping it from catching fire. Julian considered that. So you built a beautiful thing with other people. Maeve looked at him. He had a way of turning her instinct to minimize herself into something she could not dismiss so easily. She looked back at the open stage door. I hate when people say things are beautiful when they mean pretty. What do you mean? Pretty is easy. She wiped salt from her fingers with a napkin. Pretty asks nothing of you. It sits there and behaves. Beautiful is different. Beautiful can make you uncomfortable. Julian smiled. You are describing light. I'm describing everything. The words landed between them. Maeve felt them land. She folded the empty fry bag once, then again. You shouldn't be here, she said. Julian did not move. Because? Because people will talk. People already talk. That's not an answer. No. His voice lowered. It isn't. He stood from the road case. Maeve looked up at him. The corridor was narrow enough that she could see the rain-darkened curls at his temple, the small crease between his eyebrows. I don't want to be another story people tell about you, he said. I don't want you to think I came here because you're Celia's sister. Or because you had a terrible year. Or because you happened to be in front of me when something ended. Maeve's throat tightened. Then why did you come? Julian stepped closer. Not all the way. Just enough that she had to lift her chin. Because you said this place looks better at night, he said. And I wanted to see what you saw. The theater creaked around them. Maeve's fingers tightened around the tablet. I don't want to be interesting because I'm broken, she whispered. Julian's expression changed. You aren't. You don't know that. I know you make jokes when you're scared. I know you pretend coffee doesn't taste bad until you can fix it. I know you act like you don't care whether people understand your work, but you stay until midnight to make one light hit an empty chair exactly the way you imagined it. Maeve stopped breathing for a moment. Julian reached up slowly. He touched one loose strand of hair near her cheek and tucked it behind her ear. His fingers barely brushed her skin. The contact was brief. It was still enough to turn every nerve in her body awake. Don't prove anything to me, he said. Just let me know you. Maeve looked at his hand as it fell back to his side. Then she reached out and caught a small fold of his coat sleeve between her fingers. Not a kiss. Not yet. But neither of them pretended it meant nothing. For several weeks, Julian and Maeve became careful in the way people became careful when caution had already failed. They did not announce anything. They did not hold hands in front of acquaintances. They met after her rehearsals, after his dinners, after gallery events and meetings and long days that left both of them too tired to perform for anyone else. One night they walked along the East River beneath a strip of cold moonlight, their shoulders bumping every few steps because the path was too narrow for the way neither of them wanted to move apart. Another night Julian found Maeve sitting on the floor of the Elysian Theatre's backstage corridor, staring at a blown fuse panel while the crew waited upstairs. "Is this your technical expression?" he asked. "It means everything is ruined." "Very precise." She handed him a flashlight. "Hold this." Julian crouched beside her. "I should warn you, I have no practical skills. You got the hotel coat check open. I spoke to someone who did have practical skills. That counts." He held the beam steady while she traced wires through the panel, her shoulder pressed against his arm in the cramped space. When the lights finally returned, the theater above them erupted in applause. Maeve laughed and leaned back against the wall. Julian looked at her. "What? You're happiest when you solve something." She smiled crookedly. "That's not true." "No. I'm happiest when nobody needs anything from me." Julian's expression softened. Maeve felt the smile fall from her face. He did not say what he was thinking. Instead, he stood and offered her a hand. She took it. At a nearly empty diner in Greenpoint, they split fries at midnight while rain blurred the windows. Maeve told him she had begun writing lists after her engagement ended. "What kind of lists?" "Reasons I'm difficult." Julian put down his fork. "That seems cruel." It was efficient. "And what was number one?" Maeve looked at the ketchup bottle. "I don't let things go." Julian leaned his elbow against the table. "I don't think that's why you're difficult." "Oh, good. Please tell me the real reason." "You notice when people don't mean what they say." She looked at him. "That makes people uncomfortable." "It makes them feel seen." "Not always." "No." He glanced down at the table. "Not always." Maeve watched him. "What are you not saying?" Julian smiled without looking up. "I thought you were the one with a problem letting things go." She kicked him lightly beneath the table. He caught her ankle with his shoe, not trapping it, just keeping the contact there for 1 second longer. Maeve felt the small, electric pressure of it all the way up her leg. When she looked at him, Julian's expression had changed. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A waitress refilled coffee at the next table. Somewhere near the kitchen, a glass shattered. Neither of them moved. Then Maeve looked down first. She hated that she did. 3 days later, Celia returned from London. Maeve knew because her mother called while she was standing in the Elysian Theatre's lobby, adjusting a light fixture above the ticket desk. "Celia is home for a few days," Eleanor said. "She has paperwork, a farewell dinner, some things to pack." Maeve held the fixture steady with one hand. "That sounds very organized." "Maeve." "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't sound fine." "I'm hanging from a ladder." "That may explain it." Maeve ended the call and stared at the half-lit lobby. She did not answer Julian's message that night. Or the next morning. When Celia asked to meet her at a gallery cafe in Chelsea, Maeve almost refused. Then she went. The cafe was tucked behind a small contemporary gallery where white walls held enormous abstract canvases that looked like storms trapped beneath glass. The room smelled of coffee and fresh paint. Celia sat near the back in a black coat, her hands around a cup of tea. Maeve took the chair across from her. "You look good," Celia said. "That's suspicious." "I'm trying to be kind." "Even more suspicious." Celia smiled, but it did not last. For a few seconds, they watched people move through the gallery beyond the glass partition. A woman in a long red coat stood before a painting and tilted her head, as if the correct emotional response might be hidden somewhere near the lower corner. Celia touched the edge of her cup. Mom has been sending me messages. Maeve groaned. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm telling you because I should. Celia looked up. People have said things. About you. About Julian. Maeve's stomach tightened. Of course they have. I don't care what Aunt Vivian says. Then why bring it up? Celia's gaze held hers. Because I care what you believe. Maeve looked away. Outside, a delivery truck backed up with a beeping sound that seemed too loud for the quiet room. Celia continued. I don't want to be the woman you have to hurt in order to be happy. Maeve's throat closed. I don't want to hurt you. I know. Celia's voice softened. But that isn't the same thing. Maeve's fingers curled around the napkin on her lap. Celia leaned forward. I was sad when we broke up. I am still sad sometimes. Julian mattered to me. Her eyes sharpened slightly. But I do not want to become this symbol in your life. The sister who always has the better thing. The sister whose shadow you have to either escape or stand beneath. Maeve swallowed. You don't understand. I think I understand more than you think. Celia looked tired now, not polished. You keep making me the reason you can't want anything. That still puts me in the center of your life. Maeve flinched. Celia's voice broke, just a little. I don't want to be there. For once, Maeve had no sharp answer. She stared at the cafe table. Her sister had spent years being the correct answer in every room. Celia was calm. Celia was successful. Celia knew what she wanted. Celia never embarrassed anyone at Christmas dinner. Maeve had hated her for it sometimes. She had also loved her. Those things had always felt impossible to hold at once. I don't know how to stop comparing, Maeve said. Celia reached across the table but did not take her hand. Then don't start by comparing. Start by deciding what you want when nobody is watching. Maeve looked at her. Celia gave a small, sad smile. That's harder, isn't it? That night, Maeve stayed late at the theater. She turned off every light except the work lamps over the stage. The empty seats below her disappeared into darkness. Outside the side exit, rain had begun again. When she finally left after midnight, Julian was standing beneath the awning across the street. He was soaked at the shoulders. Maeve stopped. You've been waiting. Julian looked at her. I sent 2 messages. I know. I didn't know if you wanted me to leave. She crossed the street slowly. What if I did? Then I would have. His answer hurt more than she expected. The rain whispered against the awning above them. Maeve looked at his wet hair, the tiredness around his eyes. I saw Celia, she said. Julian nodded. She said I can't use her as a reason not to be happy. That sounds like Celia. She also said she doesn't want to be sacrificed in some tragic story about us. Julian looked down. She shouldn't be. Maeve hugged herself against the cold. I don't want you to look at me and remember what you lost. Julian's expression tightened. I don't. You can't know that. I can know what I feel. You're good at knowing what everyone else feels. That doesn't mean I don't know my own. Maeve looked away. A car passed through the wet street, throwing pale light across them for a second. I'm scared, she said. Julian went quiet. It was the first time she had said it without turning the fear into a joke. I'm scared that everyone is right. That this is just me taking the first thing that made me feel chosen after everything fell apart. Her voice trembled. And I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize I was only close because Celia was gone. Julian stepped nearer. Not enough to touch her. Enough that his voice did not have to compete with the rain. I won't ask you to carry my history for me, he said. And I won't let you use Celia to punish yourself for wanting something. Maeve's eyes filled. What about later? Julian's face changed. He could have said later will be fine. He could have said I promise. Instead, he looked directly at her. Later, I will have to choose you again, he said. And if you choose me, I will. Maeve shook her head. That's not enough. Julian's mouth tightened, but he nodded. No, he said. It isn't. Not yet. She took one step backward. He let her. 3 days later, he asked her to meet him at the hotel cafe where they had first waited out the storm. The cafe was still nearly empty at closing. The same window held the same blurred reflections of traffic. The same barista stacked chairs in the corner. Rain tapped at the glass, gentler than before. Maeve arrived with her coat buttoned to her throat. This time, her bag was over her shoulder. Her phone was fully charged. Nothing had forced her to come. Julian sat in a booth near the window. 2 cups waited on the table. 1 black coffee. 1 latte with too much sugar. Maeve sat down slowly. Julian watched her, but did not smile. I can't keep doing this, she said. He nodded. I know. You don't know what I mean. I know you're afraid. Maeve's fingers closed around the cup. I don't want to be the bad ending to your relationship with Celia. You're not. I don't want to be someone you chose because I was there when you were lonely. You're not. I don't want people to look at me and think I got something because my sister left. Julian's jaw moved. That one, he said quietly, you may not be able to control. Maeve looked at him. But you can decide whether you believe them. The rain ticked steadily against the window. Maeve's eyes burned. Julian leaned forward. I need to tell you something, and I need you not to turn it into a reason to run. She laughed once through her tears. That's an unfair request. I know. He looked down at his hands. With Celia, I spent months telling myself that being respectful meant never asking her to change anything for me. Never saying I needed more. Never making her choose me over a job, a city, an idea of herself. Maeve listened. Julian lifted his eyes. But some of that was respect. And some of it was fear. Because if you never ask someone to stay, they can never reject you for asking. Maeve's breath caught. I have been giving you space, he said. And I do think you need space. But I also need to stop pretending that space is all I want. He pushed the latte toward her. I waited. I waited until this wasn't the night of the gala. Until it wasn't your broken engagement or Celia's move or anyone's gossip. I waited until I knew the thing I felt had survived all of that. Maeve stared at him. Julian's voice was steady, but there was no smoothness left in it now. I want to choose you, Maeve. Clearly. Not because you're Celia's sister. Not because you're wounded. Not because I am trying to repair something. Because you are the woman I think about when I leave a room. Because you make every conversation feel like it matters whether I tell the truth. Because when you laugh at me, I want to earn it again. Maeve's tears slipped free. Julian did not reach across the table. He let her cry. I want to believe you, she whispered. You don't have to believe me tonight. That's the problem. She pressed the heel of her hand against her cheek. I don't know if I believe myself. I don't know if I can want something without ruining it. Julian nodded slowly. Then he stood. Maeve looked up at him, startled. He placed money beneath his coffee cup. I won't keep you here because I want you to stay, he said. That would make this another version of the same thing. Her chest tightened. He looked down at her. But I'm done pretending I don't want you. Maeve could not speak. Julian stepped away from the booth. At the door, he paused. For 1 second, she thought he might turn back. He didn't. He walked into the rain alone. Months later, the old train station glowed like a secret. Maeve's new exhibition filled the abandoned terminal at Atlantic Avenue, where rusted tracks ran beneath a high vaulted roof and old departure boards hung silent above the platforms. She had called it Equal Light. The installation was made of suspended glass tubes, hidden projectors, and long ribbons of programmable light. At first, the station would remain dark except for a slow blue pulse beneath the rails. Then, on her signal, gold would rise through the space. Not from one central source. From everywhere. The opening night crowd filled the platforms in black coats and sleek shoes. Art patrons stood beside theater people, family friends beside strangers, donors beside students who had sneaked in through the side entrance. Celia stood near the back, wearing a dark green coat and holding a small paper program. Eleanor stood with Aunt Vivian near the front. Julian arrived alone. Maeve saw him as soon as he entered. He did not come looking for her. He did not make a performance of standing nearby. He simply took a place near one of the old benches and looked up at the unlit ceiling as if he were there to see the work. Her work. Maeve turned away before he could catch her watching. Backstage, cables ran beneath black mats. Two technicians checked the control boards. The air smelled of cold iron, dust, and electrical heat. Maeve stood before a makeshift mirror in a storage room, holding her prepared opening remarks. Her hands were shaking. She hated that they were shaking. Outside, applause rose as someone announced the exhibition would begin in 5 minutes. Aunt Vivian's voice drifted through the half-open backstage door. Celia is back from London at exactly the right time, she was telling someone. And Maeve has really found her footing. It's lovely when sisters inspire each other, isn't it? Maeve closed her eyes. It was not cruel. That was the worst part. It was kind enough to be repeated. Pretty enough to survive. She crumpled the paper in her hand. One of the technicians looked over. Maeve? I can't do the speech. You don't have to, he said carefully. I can't do any of this. She stepped away from the mirror. The blue light sequence was ready. The crowd was waiting. Somewhere beyond the station doors, a train thundered underground, shaking dust from the ceiling. Maeve pressed both hands to her face. I don't want this to become another room where people decide whether I'm enough based on who I'm standing next to. Celia appeared in the doorway. Maeve lowered her hands. For a moment, neither sister spoke. Then Celia walked in and shut the door behind her. You don't owe anyone an explanation, she said. Maeve laughed weakly. You always make it sound easy. No. Celia looked at the crumpled speech in Maeve's hand. I make it sound possible. Maeve looked down. Celia stepped closer. You built this, she said. Not because you needed to beat anyone. Not because you needed to prove you weren't the difficult sister. You built it because this is how you see the world. Maeve's mouth trembled. I don't know if I can go out there. Celia glanced toward the door. You can. Then she added, but you don't have to do it for them. Julian appeared at the threshold a moment later. He did not enter. Maeve saw him and immediately lifted a hand. Don't. He stopped. I'm not going to say I'll fix it, he said. Good. Julian nodded. Then I have one question. Maeve looked at him. His eyes moved to the crumpled page in her hand. Whose story do you want told tonight? The room went quiet. Maeve looked at the paper. At Celia. At Julian. Then she unfolded the page slowly. The words were blurred where her fingers had crushed them. She took a breath. Mine, she said. Julian's expression softened. He stepped aside from the doorway. Then tell it. The lights dimmed. A staff member called for Maeve from the platform. She walked out. The station was dark now, except for the low blue shimmer along the tracks. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. The old terminal held its breath. Maeve stood near the control console at the edge of the platform. Her opening remarks shook in her hand. She looked across the crowd. Celia stood beside Eleanor, not in front of her. Julian stood farther back, his hands at his sides. No one was rescuing her. No one was speaking for her. That was terrifying. It was also the first thing that had ever felt like freedom. Maeve stepped to the microphone. "Before we begin," she said. Her voice echoed softly beneath the vaulted ceiling. She looked at the audience. "I made this exhibition because I spent a long time believing that being seen meant being measured." A few people shifted. Aunt Vivian lowered her chin. Maeve continued. "I thought I had to be brighter than someone else to deserve attention. Calmer than someone else to deserve love. Easier than someone else to deserve a place in the room." Her fingers found the control switch beside her. "But light doesn't work like that." She looked at the old tracks disappearing into shadow. "It doesn't become less real because another light exists beside it." Then she pressed the switch. Blue light rose first. It moved slowly across the floor, threading between the iron rails and abandoned benches. The station walls seemed to expand beneath it. The glass tubes above the platforms began to glow. Then gold appeared. Not suddenly. Not like a spotlight. It opened from dozens of places at once. Along the cracked tile walls. Beneath the old departure board. Inside the glass suspended over the rails. Across the ceiling's iron ribs. The entire station began to breathe in blue and gold. People looked upward. Maeve heard someone whisper her name. She did not feel smaller. At the far end of the platform, one of the guests, a woman Maeve vaguely recognized from the charity gala, turned toward Julian. "So," the woman said, too quietly to be discreet, "are you here as Celia's ex, or Maeve's?" Julian did not let her finish. He did not raise his voice. He simply turned toward her with the calm attention that made people listen. "I'm here because Maeve asked people to see her work," he said. The woman blinked. Julian glanced toward Celia, then back at the glowing station. "Celia and I ended our relationship because we had separate lives to live. Maeve and I found something because we saw each other clearly." The woman's expression changed. Julian's voice stayed quiet. No one was taken from anyone. No one was replaced. For a moment, the only sound was the low electric hum of Maeve's installation. Then Celia stepped beside him. She looked toward the woman, then toward Maeve on the platform. "My sister has always had her own light," Celia said. "Some of us just took too long to stop looking at it through a comparison." The woman murmured something that might have been an apology. Celia did not wait for it. She walked away. Maeve had heard enough. Not every word. Enough. She looked at her sister. Celia gave her the smallest nod. The kind that did not ask for gratitude. The kind that said go on. The exhibition continued. Guests moved through the glowing station, following the changing light across the old platforms. People stood beneath the suspended glass tubes and lifted their faces. A child reached for a gold reflection on the floor. A critic wrote something quickly in a notebook. Maeve answered questions. She explained the programming. She laughed when one of the technicians made a joke about the fuse box nearly ruining everything. For the first time in years, she did not feel like she was performing competence for survival. She simply felt present. By midnight, the crowd had thinned. Rain had begun outside. The final guests pulled their coats tight and disappeared down the wet street. The station slowly emptied of voices, heels, perfume, and applause. Maeve stood alone on the platform for a few seconds, looking at the final sequence of light flicker softly over the rails. Then she saw Julian near the station doors. He had not moved closer. He was waiting. The same way he had waited in the theater. The same way he had waited in the rain. Maeve walked toward him. Her boots clicked over the old tile. Julian watched her approach, his expression careful. When she stopped in front of him, he said, "Congratulations." Maeve looked up at him. "You stayed." "I wanted to." The words were simple. They still landed. For a moment, she could hear rain tapping against the high glass doors behind him. Then she said, "Do you have plans after this?" Julian's eyebrow lifted. "Are you asking?" Maeve smiled. The expression felt unfamiliar in a good way. "I am." "What kind of plans?" "A real date," she said. "One where nobody is stranded by a storm or being publicly humiliated or pretending they don't care." Julian considered that. "It sounds risky." "I know. Where would this date be?" Maeve looked out at the rain-dark street. "I was thinking somewhere with bad coffee." "That feels personal." "It is." Julian smiled. Then, more softly, "I'd like that." They stepped outside together. The rain was warm for spring, more mist than storm. The city beyond the station glowed in wet reflections. Traffic moved slowly through the intersection, red taillights bleeding across the pavement. Julian held his umbrella in one hand. Maeve looked at it. He did not immediately raise it over her. Instead, he extended his other hand. Maeve stared at it. His palm was open. No pressure. No rescue. No assumption. She slid her hand into his. His fingers closed around hers. They started down the sidewalk. At the corner, the light turned red, and they stopped beneath the umbrella while rain whispered against its dark fabric. Maeve looked at him. "Now we're not equal." Julian turned slightly. "No." She stepped closer. The city light caught in the rain on his hair. "This time," she said, "I won." Julian's smile was slow. "I was hoping you would." Maeve pulled him gently by the hand. Then she kissed him. It was not a desperate kiss. It did not apologize for anything. It was warm and certain and just long enough for the red light to change without either of them noticing. When they finally stepped apart, Julian rested his forehead lightly against hers. "Where are we going?" he asked. Maeve smiled. "Somewhere with terrible coffee." They crossed the street hand in hand. Behind them, the old station kept glowing blue and gold through the rain, no longer waiting for anyone to decide which light deserved to be seen.